Hi everyone, I'm Ramin, and in this video, our group will be exploring child poverty as a way to understand a major idea from this course. The idea is that social innovations aren't neutral solutions, but they reflect different ideas about what the problem is and how it should be solved. But before we talk about solutions, we have to look at exactly what the problem is and how people define it. Child poverty refers to situations where children grow up without access to basic necessities like healthy food, stable and safe housing, healthcare, and educational resources. It affects more than just income levels. Poverty can harm a child's physical health, emotional well-being, and cognitive development. But the definition of child poverty isn't agreed upon by everyone. Some people think it's a personal family matter rather than a social matter. But when we look at the broader impact, it becomes very clear that child poverty is a social matter. It affects entire communities and not just individual families. And this is where the course thesis becomes very important. How we define a problem then shapes the innovations that we create to address them. Every solution reflects a particular viewpoint about what the real issue is. So why is child poverty a social problem and not an individual problem? Children facing poverty are at higher risks for chronic health issues like asthma and respiratory infections, and many of these health risks come from poor housing conditions and unstable environments. Education is also affected. Kids may not have school supplies, quiet spaces to study, or consistent attendance if their family is struggling. In Canada, approximately 1.4 million children lived in poverty in 2022, which was an increase from the previous year. The rise was influenced by reduced pandemic support and growing inflation. But it's important to understand that these effects don't stop once childhood ends as well. Poor health early on in life can lead to higher healthcare costs for society. Limited education can then affect future job opportunities and productivity, and social exclusion creates long-term disadvantages for communities, such as an increase in crime and violence. All of this shows that child poverty is deeply connected to public health, economic stability, and social well-being. Its consequences ripple outward, affecting all of us. Therefore, child poverty is more than a personal problem. It's a structural issue that affects entire communities. And because child poverty is understood differently by different groups, the solutions that get proposed are anything but neutral. And this is exactly where social innovations come into the picture. Whether it's government policy, nonprofit programs, charity initiatives, or new tech, each innovation defines the problem in its own way, which then leads to different outcomes. And with that, we will now look at how various social innovations attempt to address child poverty and why these innovations are contested rather than neutral.
The Canada Child Benefit, or the CCB, is a federal program that provides monthly, tax-free payments to families with children under 18, which was created in 2016. It was created to improve on existing child benefit programs such as the Universal Child Care Benefit, or the UCCB, to provide higher levels of support to low and middle income families. The CCB is established within a particular framework of child poverty that suggests that financial insufficiencies can be addressed through cash payments. Advocates such as Campaign 2000 have raised concerns about the emphasis on cash payments, saying they do not address systemic issues that cause poverty and represent a limited understanding of income that may overlook other inequities families face. The Canada Child Benefit has lifted about 300,000 children out of poverty from 2015 to 2017. Yet, Campaign 2000 found that parents still experience major housing insecurity and do not have access to secure, adequate housing, even when a CCB payment is deposited into their bank account. Research conducted by Proof also shows that there continues to be food insecurity among low-income families receiving CCB. These realities indicate that relying on income as a solution to poverty is insufficient and highlights systemic inequalities such as high rents, low-wage jobs, and precarious employment that underline the persistence and reproduction of poverty.
The Canada Child Benefit has undoubtedly provided massive benefit towards low-income families living in Canada. However, many people argue that it's not adequate in addressing the main problem at hand, which is high costs of living within the country. Now, critics claim that there's a need for a more comprehensive, long-term solution that includes affordable childcare, affordable housing, as well as more access to public services. In fact, data from the Ontario Campaign 2000 supports this criticism, showing how the benefits provided by the CCB alone simply aren't enough to alleviate some of the stress placed on families and financial burden. Another major point of contention amongst conservative critics in particular is that they don't believe that the benefits, specifically the cash benefits provided by the CCB, are particularly useful. This is because they think it disincentivizes people from working, which then makes them dependent on government funds. From the perspective of these conservative critics, they simply believe that poverty and child poverty in general is an individual problem and is not caused by socioeconomic structures that make up the government. Now let's talk about how politics have significantly changed the structure of the CCB over time. In this article, Aaron Hutchins, an award-winning journalist, reflects on how significantly both the political and ideological changes were from the Universal Childcare Benefit to the Canada Child Benefit. He pointed out how the CCB transformed from a universal taxable benefit to a conditional income-based benefit, and this really highlighted how the construction of social policy is based significantly on how we perceive poverty and child poverty. In all, the CCB is a highly contested social innovation that embodies opposing perspectives on both the working class as well as child poverty. It has many benefits for those in need of financial assistance. However, it is also rightfully criticized for its shortcomings in both a political and economic sense.
So what have we learned about child poverty and the Canada Child Benefit? Now, throughout this video, we've seen that social innovations like the CCB are not neutral technical fixes. They're contested attempts to define and address child poverty. The CCB has undeniably helped families. It's lifted 300,000 children out of poverty between 2015 and 2017. And that's pretty significant, but as we've seen, cash transfers alone don't address the root cause of poverty. Think about it this way. The CCB defines child poverty primarily as an income problem, solvable through cash payments. But what if child poverty is actually about affordable housing? We've seen families receiving CCB still facing housing insecurity, food insecurity, job insecurity. The problem definition matters because it shapes the solution. See, the CCB diverts political attention and resources away from universal public services like affordable housing, subsidized childcare, and living wages. The government introduced the CCB in 2016. It replaced universal childcare benefit with a targeted, income-tested benefit. This shift reflects a particular ideology. Help should be conditional, not universal. See, progressive critics argue that cash benefits are like a band-aid solution. It avoids tackling the root causes of poverty, like unaffordable housing and inadequate childcare infrastructure. Conservative critics, on the other hand, worry that cash benefits discourage work and create discrepancy, arguing that poverty is an individual responsibility. The CCB oversimplifies the complex intersecting factors that create and sustain child poverty, ignoring systemic inequality, job and housing markets. See, different problem definitions lead to different solutions, and as we've explored, there's no consensus. Social innovations aren't neutral. They reflect the particular understandings of what the problem is, who's responsible, and what should be done about it. The CCB is a perfect example. It's not just a policy, it's a statement about how society views poverty, who deserves help, and what role the government should play in it. And that's what makes social innovations contested. They embody political choices, ideological assumptions, and competing visions of a just society. So as we think of child poverty and social innovations like CCB, we need to keep asking critical questions. Because here's a key insight: if social innovations reflect how we define problems, whose definitions are we using and whose are we ignoring? Ultimately, the way we answer that question determines not just which social innovations we create, but what kind of society we want to build. The Canada Child Benefit has helped families in real and measurable ways, but it also reveals something fundamental. There is no neutral solution to child poverty. Every innovation reflects a choice about who deserves help, what causes poverty, and what responsibility society has to fix it.